Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And as all of us spend a lot of time in these Zoom webinars, we all know that it can be a little bit of a trickle as people are wrapping up their last meeting and then jumping into the next one. But thank you all for being here. I'm Bobby Lauer. I'm the president of Campus Compact. Today's session is a part of a series that we're doing at Campus Compact called Resourcing for Success, which is all focus on cultivating resources for fundraising for civic and community engagement. This is work that we know is often a challenge and can be an intimidating piece of the portfolio for community and civic engagement practitioners and leaders. And through this series, and hopefully in a more robust portfolio of programming and support structures at Campus Compact, we're interested in doing a couple of things. One is just pulling back the curtain and creating dialogue and sharing how campuses are wrestling with this, and really highlighting some very specific ways that campuses are cultivating resources and identifying potential supporters for their work, but also making sure that we create space for honest conversation where members can really ask the questions of folks in the field, and making sure that we also have diverse voices represented. So you're going to see today we have a mix of faculty and staff administrators, some directly in the fundraising space, some who have more implemented and designed projects. Today is the third session in our series. The first one was with David Wirtz, and I'm going to ask Molly, who's in the room with me today. She can just put a link to the recording from his session if you just want to hold that for the future in case you missed it. And then the second session was one that we held at our Truckin' Conference, which is our gathering of R1 institutions. And that was focused on donor-funded civic and community engagement centers, really looking at what are the pathways for getting an endowed center institute. And we are still working with our colleagues from that Truckin' Institute to think about how to figure out how to get that recording to everyone. In the room, I can promise you we had a really robust and wonderful conversation. So we're still working through some logistical details to put that in front of everyone else. And if we can't figure out how to do it in a way that really reflects that session, we are going to re-record it because it was just that good, with really highlighting what these specific community engagement practitioners have really gone through, and what does it look like to have an endowed center now, and how does that play out in terms of their ongoing work, how they train staff, where their challenges are. And then today's session that I'm so excited to bring you is really going a little deeper on a specific area, which is donor-funded professorships and internships. And we're going to highlight 3 institutions, all of which I've had the pleasure of getting to know related to this specific body of work. And they're going to talk to you about what they're doing, what has been their pathway to getting here, what it looks like. And then in our conversation, we'll also unearth kind of where do we go from here, and how do these projects continue to manifest themselves. So thank you all for being here. I can guarantee we're going to have plenty of time for conversation. So don't worry about too much about that, and just make sure that you are keeping all of your questions and kind of going and working through as you hear things from colleagues, what you want to make sure that we tackle. We're going to have, everybody's going to spend, the agenda for today is we're going to spend about 10 minutes on each one of the institutions. And during that time, they're going to both talk about what their programs individually are seeking to accomplish, giving you a sense of their structure and history, and even some of their high-level finances, again, so you have a real sense of scale and scope. And then they're also going to talk a little bit about what their specific role is in fundraising for that program. And then after that, we'll have some collective conversations and then head into Q&A. So with that, I'm going to start with our colleagues at Muskingum University, and I'm going to invite Brian King and Keith to present on that. And we're going to start, I believe, with Brian.
Good afternoon. I'm very glad to be here. I know Keith is also. My name is Brian King. I'm Associate Professor of Political Science at Muskingum University, which is about an hour east of Columbus, Ohio. And I'm also co-director of the John and Annie Glenn Public Service Fellows Program, and we are completing our 4th year of existence. We are graduating our first Native cohort to the program. Just in a couple of minutes, I'd like to talk about what the program is, what it tries to do, our goals, and then Dr. Eberly is going to take over and talk about the structure of the program itself and our finances. So The John and Annie Glenn, or what we call the JAG Fellows Program, started the fall of 2019. Excuse me. It was a collaborative effort with administration after we were able to identify an alumni donor to be able to start a program like this. It was a husband and wife alumni who were both alums who wanted to make sure that students at Muskingum had the experience outside the classroom to know what it meant to give public service, sort of in the model of John and Annie Glenn themselves, who are alums as well. So what we hope to do in our program is bring in a cohort from day one of their first year and carry them through 4 years of intensive, hands-on, experiential, and some traditional academic material where we can shape them into responsible citizens and civic leaders after they graduate. We have what we call the 3 E's. We try to focus first on education, make sure they have the knowledge and the tools necessary to understand why civic engagement is important, why it's important to be knowledgeable about what's going on in your community, whether that community be local, national, or international. Secondly, we get them engaged. We try to instill in them a sense of agency and a sense of efficacy. And then thirdly, I'm sorry, of empowerment. We try to get them that sense that they can make a difference. And then engagement is the hands-on, getting them not just to involve themselves in a project, but maybe lead a project, create a project, forge connections and partnerships in the university and beyond into the community. And after 4 years, I'd like to say that we've been very successful. So Keith, if you want to take the next step.
Sure, I think I'm unmuted now. Yeah, good afternoon to everyone as well. I'm Keith Eberly. I'm Associate Professor of Education at Muskingum University, and yeah, very happy to share with you today. So I guess I'll just talk a little bit more about our program structure, and then the history, and then a little bit about how the program is funded. So we do have, or we have created a 4-year experience. So we recruit prospective students in their senior year to become, or we recruit them to apply, and then we accept them into the program. So they come to Muskingum as first semester freshmen in our program. We have then 4 different courses. We have a 110, 210, 310, and 410, and those run as you might expect: freshman, sophomore, junior, and senior. The 110 and 210 courses for freshmen and sophomores, those those tend to be more. Those place a larger emphasis on knowledge and establishing some of that education side about issues of civic engagement. What exactly it means to not just complete community service hours for a fraternity or sorority, not just check that box off of the list, but to actually think about, what makes that kind of experience meaningful and important, not only for the community you're serving, but also for the individual student engaging in that activity. So that is an emphasis for the first 2 years, and then the third course, the 310 class, is really emphasizes what we call at Muskingum a high impact experience. And the most typical, I guess, example of a high impact experience would be an internship, and that obviously can happen in a lot of different formats, but we try to take as broad of a definition of high impact experience as possible. So we'll have students study overseas for their high impact experience. Some programs have those kind of practicums built in to the academic experience, like a nursing practicum or a teacher's student teaching experience. But Muskingum has kind of committed overall to creating these kind of high impact experiences for students. And then the 410 class, the senior year fellows class for us, it is what we kind of call a give back opportunity. So the graduating or the senior fellows in our program, they'll develop a project and they'll work collaboratively to kind of give back to the campus community. So that's just the kind of the structure. Brian mentioned a little bit about the history. John and Annie Glenn, are the namesake of our program. The two alums who gave the initial donation to create the program, they did so in part to create a kind of a way to honor John and Annie Glenn's own contribution to kind of public service in American life. And so that was kind of the beginning of the financing of our program. We actually, we did not get just one very large gift that would endow the entire program. The alums who started our program, they essentially, they gave a sizable chunk of money to begin creating the program, but then their expectation was that other sources of funding would be found to continue supporting the John and Annie Glenn program. So maybe, I don't know if that's typical or atypical, but we've continued to do fundraising kind of in coordination with the development office to kind of maintain the program. I think what has always been important for us is that the administration has also supported the program, and we've not ever felt like we might be kind of left high and dry if for some reason other sources of outside funding didn't come through. So I guess that's a little bit about fundraising. I don't know, Brian, did you want to go back to the fundraising thing? And like I said, we work with the development office, and we have various days of giving that are dedicated to the fellows program itself. We'll have students cut 1-minute videos saying, hey, this is why the fellows program is great, this is what I've done, please support. We've done those kind of things as fundraising efforts. Other things, Brian?
Yeah, I'd build on that just by saying that we are in a support role. That I don't think either Keith nor I had tons and tons of institutional advancement experience coming into this, but we surely have learned a lot. And as we've built new fellows programs here at the university, we've been able to orient our new faculty co-directors into that role as well. And in one instance, we were able to get a very large gift to either endow or get close to endowing one of the programs. And I know that that's the goal for all of our fellows programs at some point. And so as advancement or, the top management here at the university feels it appropriate, they may bring us in to talk to donors. They may have us, invite donors in to see some of the things that we're doing. The 1-minute videos, I think, have been very effective as well. So it's a learning on the fly for sure in terms of how to get this funding to continue flowing in.
I'd maybe just add, and Brian, you can feel free to disagree, but I sort of feel like if you wait until you get the $10 million gift, even though we would all like to get the $10 million gift to start a program, if you just wait for that to happen, you may never create a program. So there's a little bit of, you've got to kind of create the program, build the airplane while you're flying it, so to speak, and kind of just keep working toward finding the necessary funding to really make it a long-term program.
Yeah, if we waited to be endowed, we'd not be there yet. It would still be 4 years down the road, and dozens of students would not have had the experiences that they've had, which from a fundraising standpoint is going to mean not having those future donors, those future supporters of this program.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brian and Keith. I think one thing that I think probably as we look at the other two projects we're going to feature, then when we come back to conversation, that jumps out to me that's interesting about Muskingum is that the program itself, right, is really geared towards creating these high impact experiences for students. But in that process, while it's not a professorship, it has created these kind of the faculty roles that both of you hold as kind of co-directors of this program. And I think that is a piece of the work, right? Like how we're all thinking about how we can also champion and create pathways and opportunities for our faculty and staff to really step into roles that advance the mission. So I'm struck by that too, that while the fellows program itself is really a fellows program focused on students, that there is that what has occurred in this, rather than, because sometimes we have fellows programs that just exist maybe in a department or in a civic engagement, a community engagement center. But the approach that Muskingum took in this case is really to have two co-directors from two different disciplines advancing the project. And so it might be fun to come back to that. As we jump over to our next project, Brian, I would ask if you have a chance to throw into the chat any of those 1-minute videos, just that folks could, if you have any to those, that's all, I think those kinds of resources are helpful for folks. Okay, so thank you, Brian and Keith. Well, we're going to bring everybody back as soon as we get through the overviews. But now it's my pleasure to introduce longtime collaborator, and that is Howard Rosing, who I cannot, there I can now, I think I can spotlight him. And Howard is going to talk to us about all of the work, about a number of projects happening at the Steans Center at DePaul University. And I will turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Bobby. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Howard Rosing. I'm the director of the Steans Center at DePaul University. I've been here since 2001. And I'm going to speak to you about a couple of different programs that we house here. And I want to put them in context for why we see them as really integral to development of really engaged undergraduates and graduate students at DePaul. I'll share with you some slides. Bobby, is that visual? Yes, good. All right. So the Steans Center in a couple of months will look like this with all these flowers. Right now, Chicago is, we're struggling out of the winter period, but essentially at DePaul University in Chicago, we've been here since 2001. As an endowed center through the Steans family, which is a really important supporter of DePaul University overall, but essentially has endowed the university to engage in community-based service learning and community engagements more broadly speaking. The original endowment was focused on academic service learning, integrating it throughout the university. Since then, in 2001, we've developed really an umbrella center for a variety of things. We have another unit called the Egan Office for Urban Education and Community Partnerships, which I'll mention very briefly in a moment. We also house the Asset-Based Community Development Institute, which came over from Northwestern to DePaul in 2016. And we are opening a new institute within the center to focus on incarceration and educating incarcerated students and reentering students. So I'll just briefly say that in 1998, we had a predecessor office for community-based service learning. And when the university, when the Steans family endowed the university with an initial $5 million grant, that was prompted also a set of matching opportunities that the Steans family wanted to see happen. And one of those I'll mention in a moment was a local foundation, the McCormick Foundation, that stepped up and actually doesn't do a lot of endowments, but provided us with an endowment to support an undergraduate internship program. So today, as we're a robust center doing about 4,000 students in the community every year, several hundred partners across the Chicagoland area. Essentially, our community engagement model, and this feeds into the framework for the two programs I'm highlighting, is about helping students understand that socially engaged learning is political. So many of our students are getting involved in internships and fellowship opportunities that are inherently political in nature. We try to orient them through the programs, both programs that I'll mention, through an asset-based community development model. The programs both integrate deep reflection. That's built into both donor proposals, that we have critical pedagogy, a critical pedagogical approach that helps students begin to understand their own role and positionality within the programs. And we also try to orient our students in all aspects to understanding the spaces we're going into are inherently also intellectual spaces where people are already building a knowledge sets, and how can we support the work that is already going on in communities. In brief, I mentioned service learning modalities because much of what we're doing is we're prepping students through service learning opportunities integrated into curriculum, about 200 courses a year, that then allow them to advance and go deeper at either the undergraduate or graduate level into funded projects. So these aren't, service learning is integrated in curriculum. It's not funded. I mean, it's funded, obviously we're supporting it, but students aren't funded directly through service learning, through academic service learning. But these different modalities that we have students engaged in, and I won't go through them specifically, allow students to look for opportunities in the community that then they can propose as part of the endowed programs that I'm speaking about today. And to build those opportunities, we're building partnerships across the Chicagoland area and beyond even, for students to sort of connect to. So oftentimes students will come to us with looking for opportunities to connect with certain types of organizations, with certain types of communities. And because we're building all these partnerships essentially for service learning opportunities, we are able to connect them then to make proposals for funded internships and fellowships. Some of our strengths in those areas are around schools, around engaging parents, especially through the Egan office that I mentioned earlier, which has direct school and parent partnerships and a really strong veterans program. We're working in 2 prisons on incarceration and education. We teach in those prisons. And we do a lot of work on sustainability, and especially around food systems, and also with immigrant communities across the Chicagoland area. And I won't go through this, but essentially we are training faculty to go through a process to teach academic service learning courses, and essentially also prepping them to think about how they may guide students into opportunities to work in a more advanced way, to go deeper through funded opportunities. And the first one I'll mention here is the McCormick Community Internship Program. This was the program that in 2004, actually, a few years after the initial endowment of the Steans Center, the McCormick Foundation stepped up and we started funding students for 100-hour projects per quarter. We're on a quarter system at DePaul. So in about 10 weeks, they spend about 10 hours a week working in a community, working with a community partner on a collaboratively developed project. And this is a screenshot of our website. If you want to go and take a look at it, you can get into some of the details of how it operates. And we're funding them with a stipend. They're coming together every quarter. They have to, first of all, propose the project collaboratively. And that was an essential piece of the initial donor agreement, that these were projects that were coming from communities and were wanted by the communities, that we're doing with the communities. And so students don't just come up with projects and propose them. Everything is signed off on with support from the community partners. We're asking them to come in and reflect every quarter as a cohort on the work they're doing, to get an interdisciplinary understanding of different types of projects. And they can do this for up to 3 quarters, so up to essentially almost a full academic year. And it's reviewed quarterly. Again, all of this was built into the initial donor agreement, that we have a systematic way of helping students dive deeper into community engagement and reflecting on it. Part of that is celebration, and every year in May, we hold a conference for service learning in general, but all of the McCormick community interns have to present their work. That was also part of the donor agreement, that every year the students who are in this internship program would be presenting their work to the rest of the university, and actually the public, anybody can come. And oftentimes they're presenting it alongside their community partners. And again, this is also a way to help them advance their own skills and to network with folks around the kinds of things they're interested in doing. The second and last program that I'll mention is a graduate version of essentially the McCormick Community Internship, but with a slightly different bent. We for years wanted to establish a graduate fellowship program similar to the McCormick Community Internship. And in 2021, we were able to get an endowment from the Morrison Family Foundation to create the Steans Graduate Fellowship. And essentially, the core ingredients of this fellowship are that students are, again, working collaboratively with an organization anywhere in the world. A lot of them are from Chicago, but anywhere in the world. And they have to focus on equity, social equity issues, and sustainability. So they have to sort of align the proposals that they are submitting that are collaboratively developed with an organization with the sustainable development goals, or at least one of the sustainable development goals, and articulate why what they're doing is contributing to that goal, the UN United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So a central focus on equity, a central focus on sustainability, and these, like the undergraduate internships, are for up to almost a full academic year, and are paid out quarterly. Again, and another principal ingredient, a central ingredient, is that they also come together as fellows, and we have an interdisciplinary reflection every quarter, bringing them together to understand essentially how their projects may relate. We've even had some students who started to collaborate across projects because of bringing them together. Lots of interesting sort of commonalities and methods and approaches, especially we've had a lot of students doing geographic information systems mapping, as you can see in the photo here, and really beginning to understand the sort of interdisciplinary nature of doing community engagement work. Part of that, and this just happened in February, is we invite the donor as well as graduate directors from across the university to sort of an informal gala to celebrate the work of the fellows. And so each of the fellows presents in front of the graduate directors and their programs, in front of the donor, to try to make sure that we understand and celebrate the importance of the work that they're doing. So with that, I'll finish. Thank you for your time and for including me in this presentation.
Thanks, Howard. Okay, so our final presentation is going to come from our colleagues at Grand Valley State. So I'm going to remove the spotlight and I will spotlight Lisa and Mark. you were going to jump in on that one.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mark Schaub at Grand Valley State University. I'm currently the Dean of the Brooks College of Interdisciplinaries, one of the 7 academic colleges that we have at our university. In my job as the Dean of this college, we have a number of interdisciplinary cross-institutional programs, and one of them is the Padnos Sarosik Center for Civil Discourse, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleague who is the director of that program, Dr. Lisa Perhamus.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lisa Perhamus, and I am the director. We have a few slides. We're going to talk about a little bit about what our center does and our endowed professorship, and a little bit about our programming. And then Mark will walk us through some of our institutional financing. So let me share screen. No, that's not the right. Can everyone see? Okay. So I need to move this. We are a small center that began as a program in 2013. And part of the unique part of our story is that the donors came to us. So Shelley Padnos and Carol Sarosik are 2 women who really wanted to make a difference, and they had actually a life-changing experience. They went to Amsterdam and visited the Anne Frank House Museum, and had such a powerful experience, and just knew they wanted to do something to make sure that nothing like this in life ever happened again. And when they came home, they already had a relationship with Grand Valley State University, and they knew they wanted to do something to impact students and the campus around issues of peace and impacting communities around inclusion and equity. So they approached the Brooks College of Interdisciplinary Study. And why Brooks? I think primarily the way they tell the story is because it's an interdisciplinary college. And because it has a strong history of working with donors and students and faculty in robust, impactful service learning programming. Our mission is to engage people in difficult yet necessary conversations to increase mutual understanding and deepen community. That seems such a simple task, but if we look around in our society today, we see it failing drastically, from our political leaders to our social media bubbles to our families. So what we find is that people are hungry for being able to sit down and engage in difficult and important conversations, and students in particular are looking for the skills and the know-how and the knowledge base for how to do this. So we have a good relationship with the founders. They are active. We have an active advisory board. And one thing that is true about us is that we have part-time staffing. And that is an ongoing challenge that I hope we have an opportunity to talk about during our question and answer period. So I am, as the director, part-time. We have part-time staff, support staff, as well as undergraduate student workers. I will say that when we began as the program, we had an endowed professorship and one undergraduate course, and we offered a public symposium because the donors were really interested in reaching students for student impact in the campus, and reaching the community, and also reaching looking for that faculty leadership. And we have since grown, and So we've continued the endowed professorship. It is a rotating civil discourse professorship. It rotates every 2 years. We have added, in addition to the civil discourse 3-credit course that the endowed professor teaches, an additional 1-credit civil discourse course. What I will say about the courses in relationship to the professorship is the endowed professor applies for the professorship, pitches an idea around the idea of how civil discourse relates to community building or some justice, social justice, equity idea related to our mission and our vision. The advisory board reviews the applications, and it is the endowed professor is selected on a competitive through a competitive process, and is chosen. It chooses the theme on a 2-year basis, which rotates through the center. So the theme of the course rotates every 2 years to match the professorship. And this also rotates in a matching way. It aligns with the annual community symposium. So it's very thematic every 2 years. The theme that we're currently in is around K-12, PK-12 education, and in particular around the civil discourse or the lack thereof or in school board meetings. We also focus on informal and structured campus dialogues, and we offer trainings and individualized support for community members as well as folks on campus. We focus a lot on students, so we do things for campus leaders, student organizations. We're looking into how to get into resident advisors and housing, as well as we've done things with Student Senate and those kinds of things. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to Mark.
Thanks, Lisa. So as you see on the slide, we currently have an endowment corpus of about $1 million. There, on top of that, the donors wanted to have some money directed to kind of an immediate impact, because an endowment that kind of sits there, it gets to a spend level, and then it spends out an annual spend amount, which is not huge. So in conversation with our donors, we decided that we'll use some, actually, it's more like $250,000 in the first 4 or 5 years to have more of an immediate impact. And some of that has helped get some time for faculty. And of course, Lisa Perhamus, who's the director of the center, is a tenured faculty member in our College of Education and Community Innovation. So sort of buying some of her time for reassignment to do some of this work and developing some courses. And the endowment really, you know, I heard from the Steans Center at DePaul, as you heard, that was like a $5 million endowment. You know, a $1 million endowment is, and of course, generous gift, but it's not a significant amount of money when we're talking about PSS or professional support staff time, the buyout for a faculty member to be devoted to doing the directing of this kind of thing. So some of the decisions that we've made to maximize this amount of money that we have are things like the partnerships across campus. And Lisa's been fantastic about partnering, particularly this year, but also every year, with things on campus like our Kaufman Center for Interfaith, the Student Affairs Office on Community Engagement, the Common Ground Institute and our Hauenstein Center. They also have $1 million endowment for the Common Ground, which is compatible with the Center for Civil Discourse. So talking with these partners across campus to maximize all of our collective impact on things that matter, on civil discourse in particular. And the fact that we have the tuition. So as Lisa described, there's the 3-credit course and there's a 1-credit course that this coming academic year is going to be offered by multiple faculty. So Lisa will be teaching one section of that 1 credit, a dialogue across difference course for students, and another faculty member will be teaching another section. So the fact that we are generating tuition revenue, and of course talking like an academic dean here, helps when we say, of course, the in-kind administrative support makes sense. We're generating tuition for the institution. So of course, the in-kind support for this, and therefore we don't have to rely solely on the spin-off and spend amount from that endowment corpus. So some of those things, the partnerships across campus, the fact that we have tuition generating courses, those are key elements to, again, maximize the donations that we've been provided to support this work. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So I'm going to bring everybody, all of the various presenters back in. And we're going to start with some conversations amongst us. But, right away, if there are folks who are, and Keith, I can bring you in as soon as you turn on your video. It doesn't allow me to spotlight you until then. But I'm going to get started with a couple questions, but I want to make sure that if folks are already thinking about some things that are attending, feel free to just start throwing those into chat. And we can weave those in because they might connect to some of the stuff that was on my mind during the presentation. So thank you, all of you, for sharing kind of honestly what these programs look like. I think some of the funding components, because I do think in the field, and we've heard this from a lot of members, those can be things that you really don't know. Like you said, you see this big endowed program and you really have no sense, like what is the real, like what funding do they have, or what are the real challenges with advancing it? So thanks for kind of being so honest and transparent with that. And I want to start with a question that I think all of you kind of touched on with these programs, and Keith, I'll go ahead and bring you in. With these programs, are there any tensions with how these programs are or are challenged in terms of how they are advancing your broader civic engagement goals? So how are these programs? I know we talked about, I think Howard, you definitely touched on like how they're really integrated in the same frameworks around faculty training, but with these programs in particular, do you feel like there's any tension points with how they are advancing your broader civic engagement goals as a campus?
Actually, if I could jump in from the start, I think it's the opposite here. I mean, from one angle, it's the administration who really was supporting this from the very beginning, from the top levels all the way down. So from our board to our president to our provost, and bringing us in. But in terms of the broader civic engagement goals or what we're trying to accomplish as a university, I think this is, because it's been so successful and it's gotten some recognition externally beyond the university, it can be a very strong example of why we need to do more on our campus. And I think it has allowed me to start some conversations with folks around campus that maybe I wouldn't have been able to a couple of years ago, to show that we can do this. It can be successful. You can do it on a smaller scale and hit 6 to 8 students a year and a couple of dozen at any given time. But boy, if we could just do this one thing over here, or we could just instill this as an institutional activity instead of something that just floats from one person to the next. So I think this program, even though it's smaller in scope, is going to lead to something much bigger.
I'll just share that for us, we try to be neutral as a Center for Civil Discourse so that we can be a resource for all students who, from all different perspectives, ideologically, identity-wise, you want to be a welcoming resource and inclusive for all students. In these politically charged times, if you want to have conversations across difference, that's very difficult to pull off. Getting divergent perspectives in one room and maintaining a space where you're honoring divergent views. It has been and is a challenge for us to get divergent perspectives in one room. People seem mistrustful to talk with one another. So the work is cut out for us for our program at Civil Discourse. But also as an institution, that fine line between taking a stand and being, not politically charged is one we always are trying to navigate. And I think that that's a challenge for us for our work.
Underscoring what Lisa's talking about on our campus. I'll share an example. As I told you, the center is housed in the Brooks College of Interdisciplinary Studies, which also houses a number of programs that really are centered on social justice. We have programs in African American studies. We have programs in women, gender, and sexuality studies. We have a faculty that is, in some cases, resistant to the notion that we are going to lead and engage in civil discourse with people with whom we disagree. There are some faculty that are not supportive of that. They want to have a whole set of parameters around that. And so, of course, we don't want to sit down and have a civil discourse, a civil conversation with someone who's denying our very humanity. They're not saying that at all. And in fact, that's what the events start with, what that necessary mutual respect entails. But that's one of the bits of tension here, is that there are left leaning faculty colleagues who, they also are hesitant about this whole endeavor. So I think what Lisa's talking about is an internal struggle here. Just as it's hard to get the conservative voice from the student body or the faculty who's willing to, kind of play that role or be that role, we have folks that are, on the other extreme too.
So I wouldn't say that there are any direct tensions that exist. DePaul tends to be a campus that supports all sort of political views. And I would say the biggest challenge with the fellowship as well as the undergraduate internship program has been around making sure that it's fully integrated throughout 10 colleges and schools. And it's not really a tension as much as making those in different disciplines feel welcome, to encourage their students to be a part of it. I think specifically my most recent experience around marketing, for lack of better words, the new graduate program, has been around stating that, yes, this is around equity and sustainability, but those are things that can be framed in all different ways from all disciplines, in ways that you should feel welcome to support your students. I should have mentioned the graduate fellows are actually nominated after they read the fellowship proposals that the students craft. They're actually nominated by a faculty member. And so we're trying to convince faculty from a wide variety of disciplines that obviously run the gamut in sort of political spectrums in different ways, to embrace issues of equity and sustainability for their graduate students.
That's really helpful framing. And I guess, part of it is not putting a negative lens on the tensions, but I think something that does come through is this ensuring that you all touch on, ensuring that these programs that are funded, maybe sitting inside of a center with a bunch of programs that are not funded, that it doesn't become in any sense of kind of the competitive nature or that integration piece that you're talking about. Of how do you find the path forward when you have been successful in fundraising for something? I think at Muskingum and Grand Valley State, like there are other kind of campus-wide efforts that really are advancing the civic and community engagement mission. Whereas at DePaul, this is really integrated into the broader center that is leading that work. So I think you all did a really wonderful job of sharing like how this work kind of both, you know, for Muskingum, Brian, I think, as you said, we're really excited about it being a real driver and potentially around like additional work in the future. And the civic discourse, all of us in the field, right? This has become such a huge component of our work. And so having, you know, you're having that at Grand Valley State, I'm sure is so huge. And I'm sure it's something that is really now more than ever, really an elevated sort of component within the institution and the community. Another question I have is around, and some of you talked about this a little bit, but it's this: how are you telling the story? How are you making the case both internally and externally? Because I think in every one of your cases, you also talked about like, we don't have all the resources in the door. By no means do we have all the money that we need to advance any of these programs well into the future. So how are you telling the story of your individual programs internally and externally? And maybe we could start with Grand Valley State and this time to mix it up a bit in terms of order.
It figures, because I was going to use a few minutes to think about how we were telling our story. Well, you know, did you want to jump in, Mark? I saw you unmuted.
Go ahead.
Well, you know, we have made videos and we put out newsletters and we have things like that. But I guess I want to start with some of the challenges about telling our story. I sort of feel, as the director, and maybe Mark can jump in on how we are telling our story, that we are so busy making our story that it's really hard to find time to carve out to be reflective and to do the work of telling our story. And I think that time is an asset that, as a faculty member, also juggling the hat of the director, I don't always feel that I have. And this is a built-in structural sort of challenge that we're working with. So, you know, over the summer months, and as I continue to, as the center grows and we work on things, you know, how to do a better job with that and work with university development to do that. But I wanted to mention that I think for the smaller centers and programs, that sometimes you're so busy with the doing that the telling part is really a challenge. I think that that's a challenge for us. Go ahead, Mark.
Well, I don't know if we have a story. You know, there is a story, and, you know, Lisa shared with you, how did this center come to be? And our donors, you know, were inspired by this experience that they had overseas. But what I think that we have is a collection of telling individual stories. So the most memorable and impactful things that have happened at symposia, that happens in individual classes, is for people to be able to tell their story and have it heard. And it's the story of changing their minds, about understanding a tough topic in a different way. It's about realizing that the fact that we're not talking well amongst ourselves in this country is the biggest challenge. I mean, it taps into individuals' fears. So, you know, the center is at its best when we let people on a one-to-one or at a small table where total strangers are thrown together for an evening with food, and multiple generations are there, and let them tell their stories. That's the power of the Padnos Sarosik Center for Civil Discourse, to have an 18-year-old traditional age first-year student talking with total strangers who are, you know, middle-aged people who came off the street because they're, you know, they like to talk to undergraduate students, people from the retirement community who are terrified about what their country has come to, where we can't have civil dialogue. And those people, over a course of an hour and a half, sharing stories, walking away as maybe not friends, but with a sense of purpose and a sense of humanity that they didn't have when they started, before they came to that event.
Just a really practical follow-up. So you mentioned, and on your website, you have the kind of just give to support civil discourse, call to action there. Are there any very just tactical ways that you recognize donors throughout the year, specifically for this program? Like, is there anything unique that you do, or, what is
The
that look like?
videos that Lisa mentioned, but frankly, the fact that we're a named center that's been in existence for a number of years is hard to get additional funds, because people think, oh, why should I give to the Padnos Sarosik Center? It exists. They have, donors that gave a lot of money. It's actually, it's hard to raise more money. We have to hustle every day.
Because everybody wants to create something, right? That's one of the challenges. Okay. So, sorry, I muted too quickly. Howard, similarly, could you share us a little bit of I think how you tell and share the story, but also kind of that final question of how do you do that in some tactical ways? What does it look like to really recognize and sort of steward donors? Of course, and you can talk about Steans broadly or both these internship programs.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the programs, we have built into the graduate program that the donors will be invited each year, actually every other year, to an event where the graduate fellows are highlighted. On the off years, we're doing videos of the fellows so that they can sort of short videos that they can articulate some of the work that's being done. One of the challenges that we're facing now is implementing Collaboratory. We're a Collaboratory campus, for those of you familiar with Collaboratory, as a tool for documenting community engagement. So we need to get all our fellowships, our internships into Collaboratory as part of telling the story of DePaul's community engagement work. We also, in addition to the events that I mentioned, including the Service Speaks conference where the undergraduates present at, and the graduate fellowship event, we write a number of newsletter articles about the students, but also, and there'll be actually one coming up soon about the graduate fellowship, giving voice to their projects. But we also post, and I'll sort of share an example. We post the reports of the graduate fellows on our website. So we can guide people who are interested to, go in and sort of, click on one of these and learn about, what the student did, in this case, around wasted food in Chicago, sustainability and an equity issue, as I mentioned. So we're doing that in a way to try to engage the public, but mostly tell our story internally, so that we have more students who are coming from diverse disciplines applying for these programs.
Thanks. Brian and Keith?
Oh, there was a question. Sorry, there was a question. What was the second part of your question? Maybe I missed it.
Oh, you kind of said it. It was kind of like, how do you highlight them? So you kind of mentioned about
right. Got it. Thank you.
Yeah. If there's anything else, I went ahead and threw in but if you have links to any of those videos, Howard, that kind of, if you have any links to those, throw those in the chat too.
They're under production still. So
got it.
yeah.
To come.
Yeah, I would just say right off the bat, I really like that kind of student project profiles that you just showed, Howard. I think that's definitely something we could have students kind of write up a summary of what they've done in their high impact experience project and then share that on the website. That would be, I think that would be a very good thing to do. But I would say, generally speaking, both internally and externally, we tell our best story when we have the students as the ambassadors, and the students kind of sharing their experiences, whether it's alumni donors or even other faculty members. We're just to faculty, right? What do we know? People are much more interested to kind of hear what students are doing. And so, yeah, internally, I mean, we're a small enough campus. There's really, maybe not, it's going to be difficult to not know about the John and Annie Glenn Public Service Fellows, especially with the John and Annie Glenn part of it. They catch a lot of attention in the Muskingum community. But for sure, having students working on projects, being visible, talking with their advisors, with their the faculty members in their academic departments. I mean, that I would guess it's kind of true for all of us here, but for sure, the John and Annie Glenn Fellows come from all kinds of different academic backgrounds. So, we have people in the science division, we have people in the kind of the humanities division, we have people in the social science division. So, we're getting that story spread through the students in that way. Then externally, I would also say, Brian and I certainly do some communicating, but students have had phone call conversations, Zoom conversations with alumni donors. That's always a really great way for donors to see their money at work, their money in action, to hear students describing what they've been able to do because of the donation. And then we've had several I guess kind of targeted events, usually around like homecoming. We have like a scholarship day for prospective students in February. I feel like there's one other, maybe a parents weekend. So some kind of specific days where alumni, board of trustee members, prospective students and families are on campus, and then we'll basically there will be a student presentation where the students will talk about the various projects they've either done, both as freshmen and sophomore, but then also especially what they've done in their high impact experience, right? Because that's kind of the eye-catching thing. Like last spring, or was it? Yeah, last spring, I think it was, we had a student who actually, we were giving this presentation, but she was in Northern Ireland doing her high impact experience, and she zoomed in, kind of in the middle of the night for her, but she zoomed in and shared what she was doing. And she was basically working on a project where she was looking at, like, what does civic engagement look like in Northern Ireland, at a university in Northern Ireland, and then kind of comparing it to what it obviously looks like, in the United States, at a school like Muskingum. So she was able to kind of share that with various alumni, all the way from Northern Ireland. So yeah, I think tactically, if you will, getting students out there sharing the story is maybe the most effective way to do it.
And I would add, quite unpoetically, that there's also the data-driven part of this, the return on investment, if you will, that in order to make, especially internally, to make the case that the program is contributing to the university in some way. I mean, we, as faculty, as directors, we like to think we're looking at the student development and we're looking at more faculty connections and things like that, but there are the practical aspects as well. We're a small private in the Midwest with a declining population. We need to be able to justify, in an atmosphere where there's very limited funding and more competition for that money, that we're bringing in students and we're keeping them here, for example. That if we weren't able to do that, we're not the priority all of a sudden from a practical standpoint. So you've got to keep those things in mind as well and be able to tell that part of the story.
Awesome.
I just add to that point. One of the things that I'm faced with is in marketing our new, so the graduate endowment for the Steans Graduate Fellowship was $1 million. And so is part of my argument was that I believe that that type of investment should be widely spread across the curriculum, across disciplines, and should be part of enrollment management and marketing. It should be integral to how the university markets graduate programs. That every website with a graduate program should have a link to the fellowship that says you can come here to DePaul and you could do a project that's mission-based, that is community engaged, that's focused on equity and sustainability, and you could get it funded for multiple terms. I think that should be part of the selling point, for lack of better words, to enroll students in graduate programs.
It's a great charge. I think one of the things that, and I want to kind of pause and just create some space for anybody who's with us today to ask a question. So just go ahead and put your hand up and I will spotlight you as well and bring you into the conversation. But something that I'm struck by is that I've already heard from others who knew about today's session and I checked out your links, that some of it is people in our week, we need that inspiring program to take to an advancement officer at our own campus and say, like, is this something we can do? Because, while it's a challenge when you have something that appears named and funded, right? Like that can be a challenge. I think, as Mark, you were naming, one of the kind of flip side opportunities to that is that people can get pretty motivated and excited. But like, wow, like this, particularly, I think what I like about all of your programs is from a fundraising standpoint, they are accessible points. These are often we hear about $1 million endowment. And so to be able to put some already structured programs that exist at other institutions in our field in front of some of our fundraising colleagues and say, this is something, can we rate, is there a donor that matches to this that we could approach? So is there anyone who has a question they would like to ask? No? I know lots of these names. Sure, no one has could be even specific if you're just kind of wondering something about one of the programs you want to know a little bit more depth on.
We've just been so thorough and detailed in our responses
That must be it, right? Okay, well, I have another one, but if you have a question, come back to it. So I kind of just touched on it, but that is, that this work, fundraising for any of this happens in partnership with our colleagues in development. So I am curious because we have such a mix of folks. We've got a dean, we've got faculty members, we have a center director. How do you foster that? And what are some challenges at your campus or kind of strategies in just being effective in building a really collaborative and strong relationship with advancement? And maybe it hasn't always been strong, and feel free to kind of talk about that too. And maybe Howard, I'll start with you and then we can work our way around.
So we've had a very good relationship with our advancement office. They stewarded the initial endowment back in 2001, principally because the benefactor, Harrison Steans, and the center is named after his father, was a trustee of the university, and also not a graduate of DePaul, not an alum, but felt that the mission of the institution was really in line with his values, and introduced the concept of service learning at a time when it was not in its infancy, but maybe its toddler stage. And when we went to do the matching program, it was advancement that had to sort of court foundations like McCormick to say, this is what the value you will get out of this type of center. You will have a sort of very structured and guided way that community organizations, especially in Chicago, will get, intellectual capital from students, right? Who are going to be applying skills directly to support many of the organizations that the funder, that the donor was also perhaps supporting in Chicago. And then I would say that initial relationship between the center and advancement, using them as sort of a guide or collaborating with them as a guide, when we went back to them for other types of funding over the years, Of course, there were changes in leadership over time. The success that we had just kind of built on itself, and it was sort of a natural relationship over time. And of course, re-educating new leadership in that area was always, a challenge, but not one that was difficult at our institution because of our mission. So anybody who gets hired into advancement at DePaul begins, like I did at one point, to truly understand the mission of the institution and why this work is so central.
Thanks. Who wants to jump in next?
I think for us at Muskingum, it's a different sort of environment in the sense that we're so small that first of all, we know each other, and you know each other on a personal level. But so many of us are involved in multiple things that it's quite possible that we're trying to carry water for more than one program or more than one initiative. And you may come across some of the same donors talking about different things. And I know I'm a member, I'm part of another initiative where we're trying to raise money to endow that long-term existence. And we've run into some of the same folks. And we lost a faculty member last year in building the scholarship and learning how that process works from the ground up, running into some of the same potential donors. So that's been my experience.
Thanks.
I don't know that Lisa would share this, but I'm going to say this about Lisa. Lisa has been really doing the best work in this area because of the great relationship that Lisa has developed with the donors over the years, and they trust her. And I think that counts for so much more than going kind of through a development officer who, those folks, we have some great colleagues in our development who, understand the relational nature and long-term, stewardship of those relationships. But, at the end of the day, they come and go in development. And Lisa, who's been the director of this center from the beginning, and I hope continues for many, many, many years, has that direct relationship of trust and understanding with the donors. And I think that counts for so much, where, we don't need the development people as much. Do you want to add to that, Lisa?
I really don't necessarily want to add to that, although I hear what Brian is saying about running into the same donors across multiple initiatives and things. I think that we run into that a little bit in a smaller city and on a mid-sized campus. So that's one of our challenges. And just as a center trying to establish itself, I think, getting attention, that we're small but mighty has been part of our work. And this year we were really successful in leveraging partnerships internally with our local PBS broadcasting program, television programming, and NPR, and a couple of other entities on campus. And we ran an initiative that was backed by the president. It was a presidential initiative, and we ran programming all through the year, which really elevated our visibility and our impact in the community, largely in the community and on the campus. Our programming was also made into television spots that have been aired on PBS. So I'm really interested to see what our relationship with development looks like next year. So till next year.
That's really helpful. And I see Lara ask a question here around donor relations. And I mean, you guys all kind of talked about how to tell and share your story, but, just maintaining those relationships. Is there anything that's really worked for you that you could talk about? I mean, Lisa, I don't know if you want to jump in just because, we're just ending on you, and Mark was talking about how that's something that's real strength of yours.
Oh, well, I had the privilege of being the first endowed professor of the program when we first began. And so as a faculty person, I was really excited about all of the things that were happening through the endowed professorship. And the donors were actually really excited by the beginning of the program. And so they were really receptive. I actually, in retrospect, probably didn't know I wasn't supposed to do this, but I reached out to them directly and said, hey, this great thing happened in my class. Hey, this great thing we're doing in the symposium. Oh, I'm so excited. A student had this transformational moment and I want to share it with you. And I really, we really just developed a relationship that has been built on trust over the years, where we share meals and I really do keep them apprised of what's going on, and I share with them. Not so much, we do talk business, but they're interested in those transformational moments of the stories. They go back to the heart. What first made them start this center? What was their first vision when they visited that Anne Frank house? And what are those stories that they're hearing on campus and in the community now that's touching people's lives in those ways? And when they hear those stories of impact, they're motivated to keep going. And that is in fact why we're no longer a program and we now are a center as of 2021. So I think we're going to continue to grow, and I think it makes all the difference. So thank you.
Who else?
Well, I can just add a few things. One is, yes, coffees, meals together. I just had dinner with the family recently. I have coffee with our graduate fellows donor every year, at least once a year, not sometimes twice. But I would say it's more than that. It's sort of about being authentic and laying it all out. We publish evaluation reports about our work that, you know, the good, the bad, the ugly. You know, just talking about our challenges, what might be coming up and why things may be difficult. I think being authentic, right? That this work is not all celebrating. It runs into barriers, and that that's part of it, right? And we can't gloss over that part of it, and really being authentic in our conversations and making sure that they get the full picture of how things operate is really important.
And there's that sweet spot, right? If you gloss over everything and everything's wonderful, well, you don't need money because everything's going great. And if you focus on all the needs you have, then, well, you know, maybe it's not the best place to invest because nothing's going on, nothing good is happening. I think authentic is probably the absolute best way I've ever heard that put.
Great. And I just want to name something that we're going to work on putting up, but one of our colleagues, when we had the Endowed Center conversation recently, you know, it came up, but how do you think about writing this in around expectations that everybody on your team is really involved in this cultivation and stewardship? And I think all of us benefit sometimes from having that sort of boilerplate language of how do you weave that in. So that's something that we're working on capturing and we'll kind of put back out to the field. And also then how do you develop capacity among your team members to also help them understand how to do this work? And so those relationships can be multifaceted and collective. The other thing I wanted to name that here is a little bit different, but we do hear often from center directors this feeling of, and particularly when they're not endowed, that they don't feel like there's any representation in the development and advancement office. They're just kind of, they're sitting as a center and they don't have a major gift officer attached. So if they don't have that academic kind of home, that it can kind of sometimes feel like where you start. And I think both at Grand Valley and at Muskingum, both these examples are examples of other ways to look at this, working through whether it's fellowships or professorships can be another approach around thinking about how to raise resources is to advance the mission, but from a different pathway. And I think that's part of what's great about highlighting them here. We're about ready time to wrap, and I'm okay wrapping a couple minutes early. So I just want to leave everybody with a last kind of word. And I think it's just like on your mind of as you think about the future, like what comes next. And I would also ask Howard, if you happen to have, I'm all about links and resources. If you happen to have any links to those like evaluation reports that you said, that would be great too. So we can always share them afterwards. But let's go ahead and just share, what do you think, anything you want to share that comes to mind during this hour and a half we spent together, or just what do you think, what does the future look like for your program or center, particularly around fundraising? And whoever wants to start, I'm not going to put you on the spot unless no one volunteers, then I will.
Well, so just I've got one thought. We kind of created the First Fellows program at Muskingum. They're kind of based on some of our success. The Muskingum has created 3 new fellows programs, so we feel really good about it. But I guess the kind of the larger point, and maybe something that would help other folks on this Zoom call, kind of begin to frame maybe whatever they want to do. Muskingum is a very student-centered university. In fact, we just got an HLC report back that said, it's kind of amazing how student-centered we are. And I'm guessing just about every higher education institution in America would say they're student-centered. But I guess I would say we're really student-centered. And what I mean by that is I think that that kind of messaging is coming from the top. It's in our development office, it's in our admissions office, it's in our alumni office, it's everywhere. And of course, that's good for the students, right? We're focused on their experience and their development. So I mean, it is a good thing, but also there is a practical reason why Muskingum University is so student-centered, and that's because of the challenges we face with recruitment and retention. Right. And in this day and age, I guess I don't know about everybody else, but, enrollment continues to be a challenge. And so this like student-centered campus and the fellows program specifically, they're about, enhancing recruitment and retention. And I guess I think that's a selling point on just about any campus. If you go to your administration or your alumni office or your development office and say, we want to contribute to the university's mission and, enhance recruitment and retention, then I think you're going to get people who would be willing to listen to what you have to say about whatever center, professorship, endowed professorship, fellowship, whatever it is that you're thinking about. I think that's the selling point as you start an initiative like this.
And let the students tell the story. We came to your university because of this program. We heard about it when we were in high school, or we donated because we saw all the good works that this program was doing. It may seem, and it's, I think, very alien to both Keith and I to sort of try to promote the program without self-promoting, because we're not the kind that want to self-promote, but promote the program as much as you can outside the walls of your comfort zone, outside the university. And that high profile, I think, will go very far to getting more recognition for the program, and that then gives you some weight and gravitas when asking for more funding.
Sorry. Thanks, Brian and Keith. So Howard?
Yeah, I mean, I could just add that I think the future is in this type of work for especially universities, like Keith was saying, are very student focused, and I would say ours is very much that way. I would say teaching focused is really a centerpiece of DePaul. And I think we lead with our mission in so much of our work. And part of that is, you know, in our marketing and in everything, our mission is centered. And we make this promise, right, to students that you're going to come here and you're going to have a different experience because you're going to be engaged, you're going to be focused on societal issues, important transformational issues. And I think the civic and community engagement promise that's articulated in some of the panel today in a variety of ways is something we need to fulfill. And so if we're going to fulfill that, we need to find sustained ways to fulfill that. And that's where endowments, I think, matter in a big way. How do we fulfill the promise that we're making to students that you're going to come here and you're going to do something different? You're going to be involved in a unique way in transforming society.
Awesome, thanks. Last word from Grand Valley State team.
Okay, I see Mark is not unmuting himself, so I will go. So I think part of a big part of our work, and the work maybe before all of us or a lot of us, especially the smaller scale folks, is how do we leverage partnerships? That's particularly true for us moving forward, and especially after this year, as I was just describing our partnership year that we just had. So as we move forward and thinking about our funding, I think that's the reality. I don't see an influx of money coming our way. So as we continue to think about how to leverage the partnerships that we have, how to be that small but mighty team, how to be industrious, resourceful, think creatively. And also I want to take this conversation and think creatively about how we can tell our story. So I want to thank everyone on this call for that, and also for thinking about ways I think is really important for thanking and highlighting folks who give to the center and to the program, to the donors, which really important takeaway as well. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you so much to Lisa, Howard, Brian, Mark, and Keith for being with us today. Our next session is coming up soon on May 10th. It's going to focus on federal earmarks as a pathway for advancing the work, and we're going to feature Loyola University in Maryland and Rutgers University Camden. So more information to come. Have a great afternoon.